Royal Air Freight Flight 988 was en route to Chicago Executive Airport to pick up cargo. Unbeknown to the crew, beneath them lurks a danger that was going to lead them to disaster. What follows is a true story that highlights a common threat that all aviators face, and one that needs to be taken seriously. On the 5th of January 2010, Royal Air Freight Flight 988, a Learjet 35A, was due to conduct a routine positioning flight scheduled to pick up cargo at Chicago Executive Airport in Prospect Heights, Illinois, and then continue on to Georgia. The flight was scheduled to depart from Oakland County International Airport in Pontiac, Michigan at 12:30 Central Standard Time. Visual meteorological conditions were prevailing along most of the route. The crew reported for duty around noon, making this their first flight of the day. The flight was piloted by an experienced crew, consisting of a captain and a first officer. The captain held an airline transport's pilot certificate, which included a multi-engine land rating, as well as type ratings on both the Learjets and the Cessna Citation 500. He began his career with Royal Air Freight in September 2003, initially serving as a second-in-command in Learjet aircraft. During his time at Royal Air Freight, his qualifications continued to grow, and on the 2nd of July 2009, he successfully completed the required Part 135 proficiency and line checks, enabling him to serve as pilot-in-command in Learjet aircraft. He held a first-class airman medical certificate issued on the 21st of April 2009 with no restrictions, and he had a total of 7,100 flight hours, with 3,000 hours in Learjet aircraft, including 400 hours as pilot-in-command. The first officer was a seasoned aviator with significant experience in various aircraft types. He held a commercial pilot certificate with ratings for single and multi-engine land, along with a second-in-command rating for Learjets. He joined Royal Air Freight in February 2005 and held a first-class airman medical certificate issued on the 1st of April 2009, with a limitation requiring the availability of eyeglasses for near vision. He has a total of 6,700 flight hours, with approximately 3,000 hours as second-in-command in Learjet aircraft. This flight on the 5th of January 2010 was their first flight of the day, and like the captain, the first officer had not been on duty since the 23rd of December 2009, giving them a few weeks of rest prior to this flight. The aircraft involved was a 1977 Gates Learjet 35A, a high-performance business jet known for its speed and versatility. This particular aircraft, with the serial number 156, was initially certified as a transport category aircraft and issued a standard airworthiness certificate on the 12th of December 1977. Royal Air Freight acquired the aircraft on the 25th of September 2009, just a few months before this incident. As of the day before this incident, the aircraft had accumulated 15,827 total airframe hours. The left engine had recorded 13,384 hours, while the right engine had logged 15,172. On the 4th of January, the day before this incident, the Learjet flew 3 legs totaling 2.6 hours. There were no discrepancies noted in the aircraft's daily record sheets within 30 days leading up to this incident, indicating that the aircraft was in good working order before this day. After the crew arrived at the aircraft, they carried out the start checks, started the engines, and taxied to their takeoff runway. At 12:35, Royal Air Freight Flight 988 took off from Oakland County International Airport. During their initial climb, they checked all the systems were working correctly, and once satisfied, they continued their climb to an altitude of 20,000 feet. They reached their cruising altitude without any reported issues. During the initial climb and en route portions, everything seemed normal. No abnormalities were reported by the crew to air traffic control, and the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR, captured nothing out of the ordinary. At around 13:06, the first officer contacted Chicago Air Route Traffic Control Center, reporting that they were at flight level 200, or around 20,000 feet. The crew were then cleared to descend to 4,000 feet and were instructed to be 35 miles northeast of the Northbrook VOR. As the Learjet began its descent, the crew obtained the latest weather information for Chicago Executive Airport. They listened to the Automatic Terminal Information Service, or ATIS. This indicated that winds were from 310 degrees at 9 knots, visibility was 10 miles with few clouds at 2,500 feet, and the ceiling broken at 5,500 feet with a temperature of -6 degrees Celsius. In addition to the ATIS, numerous pilots' reports about icing conditions in the area were received during the day. These included reports of trace, light to moderate, and moderate rime icing from the surface to 6,000 feet in the area. They continued on their descent with this weather information. The Learjet was certified to operate in known icing conditions, so the crew were able to continue, although reducing the time in the icing conditions was a priority. During their descent, they soon encountered icing conditions. Icing can occur in clouds where the temperature is at or below freezing, and it can have a significant impact on aircraft performance. At 13:11, the captain and first officer decided to turn on all the anti-ice systems on the aircraft. This caused some of the bleed air from the engines to be redirected to the leading edges of the wings and horizontal stabilizer. This hot air causes the area to heat up, preventing ice from accumulating on them. By 13:14, the flight was cleared to descend to 3,000 feet, and the crew reported moderate rime ice accumulation. Rime ice is a type of ice that forms when supercooled water droplets freeze rapidly on contact with the aircraft surface. This type of ice can be particularly insidious because it disturbs the smooth flow of air over the wings, increasing drag and reducing lift. The crew's concerns were evident as they reported the ice conditions to Chicago Approach Control. As 13:23, the first officer reported that they had the airport in sight. As the crew were now clear of cloud and any visual moisture, they decided to turn off the anti-ice systems. This would give them a slight increase in performance to the engines during the approach, as it would shut the valves diverting the bleed air from the engines, allowing for maximum performance. The approach controller cleared them for a visual approach to runway 16, and subsequently the tower cleared them for a right traffic circling approach to runway 34. Being cleared for a circling approach, this would mean they would fly an approach to runway 16 before then breaking off, keeping runway 34 in sight to land on that runway. A circling approach is carried out for a variety of different reasons, including wind conditions, obstacles on the approach, or most commonly, where an instrument approach is required due to poor weather, but the systems are only operational on a specific runway which is not into wind. So an instrument approach is carried out to a circling minima, and then the aircraft is maneuvered to land on the active runway. For the crew of Royal Air Freight Flight 988, as they approached the airport, they started to configure the aircraft for landing. They started to deploy the flaps and extended the landing gear. The winds were reported as 310 degrees at 9 knots, well within acceptable limits. However, as the aircraft turned to align with the runway, something went terribly wrong. At 13:27, the captain called for full flaps. Almost immediately, the aircraft's bank angle began to increase sharply, and the true airspeed started to decrease. The captain and first officer struggled to maintain control, with one of them exclaiming, "What the f*** is going on here?" In a desperate attempt to regain control, the captain asked whether the autopilot was off. One of the crew members then stated, "I don't like this at all, what the f*** is going on?" Moments later, the captain instructed the first officer to check the fuel balance. The first officer reported that the fuel balance looked good, but mentioned that the spoiler-on thing isn't working for some reason. This was followed by the first officer's urgent command, "Add full power, add full power." tragically, it was too late. The Learjet entered a steep bank, lost lift, and rolled into a nosedive. At 13:27, just seconds before the crash, the cockpit voice recorder recorded the first officer's last words, "Add full power," followed by the chilling sound of impact as the aircraft plunged into the ground near the airport. Several witnesses observed the final moments of the flight. One witness, who was at the airport, described seeing the aircraft make a steep, rapid bank before it seemed to snap roll into a stall and then immediately into a nosedive. Another witness, a pilot familiar with the Chicago Executive Airport, reported that the aircraft appeared slightly uncoordinated during the base to final turn, with the right wing down and the nose slightly low. The wreckage of Royal Air Freight Flight 988 was discovered approximately 1.4 nautical miles south-southeast of the runway 34 threshold at Chicago Executive Airport. The aircraft came to a rest within the Lake Avenue Woods Forest Preserve. Examination of the wreckage revealed that all fracture surfaces exhibited signs consistent with overload failure, with no evidence of any pre-impact failures. However, due to the severe fragmentation and impact damage, flight control continuity could not be conclusively determined. The wreckage was scattered across the site, with the nose and cockpit having separated from the fuselage. This section was found inverted near the tail of the airplane. Both wings were found in position near the fuselage, with the left wing above the waterline and the right wing submerged. This crash was catastrophic, with the aircraft destroyed on impact. Both the captain and first officer sustained fatal injuries, with emergency response teams arriving quickly, but nothing could be done to save the crew. To understand what happened, we need to delve deeper into a few areas, most notably the impact of rime ice on aircraft performance. Rime ice, as we discussed, forms when supercooled water droplets freeze instantly upon contact with the aircraft. This type of ice is rough and opaque, and while it might not seem as dangerous as clear ice, it can be just as deadly. Rime ice disrupts the smooth airflow over the wings, which is crucial for generating lift. As the ice builds up, it increases drag and reduces the wing's ability to produce lift. This forces the pilot to compensate by increasing power or angle of attack, both of which can lead to a stall if not managed carefully. In the case of Royal Air Freight Flight 988, the presence of rime ice likely caused significant disruptions to the aircraft's aerodynamic performance. The cockpit voice recorder recorded fluctuations in the engine's low-pressure stall speed, or N1, between 30 to 80% during the final moments of the flight. This fluctuation could have been a result of ice affecting the engines or the air entering them, leading to power inconsistencies just when the crew needed stable performance the most. As the aircraft turned onto the final approach, the increased bank angle, combined with the loss of lift due to the ice, may have pushed the aircraft into an aerodynamic stall. Despite the crew's attempts to recover by adding full power, the aircraft's low altitude and steep bank angle left them with no room to recover. Although the focus of the cause of the crash appears to be on the ice accumulation, which is a valid one, I can't help but personally feel that there was an issue with the flaps or spoilers. The fact that they began to get into trouble immediately after selecting down flaps could indicate a failure of the system, especially as the aircraft immediately started to roll. It's only speculation on my part, but my initial thoughts when researching this incident was that one of the flaps had failed to extend due to being frozen and caused asymmetric flap extension, or as the first officer mentioned during the incident, that the spoiler arm was having issues. The spoilers automatically assist the ailerons once the flaps are beyond 25 degrees. This occurred when the flaps were moved into the down position. What was noted during the investigation by the NTSB Materials Lab was that the caution lights for the system did illuminate during the incident, which would corroborate what the first officer stated when he mentioned about the spoilerons having a problem. That being said, both the left and right spoiler were found in the down and locked position in the wreckage. This is consistent with a failure of the system where the spoilers will remain down. The aircraft is still controllable with the ailerons, even if the spoilers fail, so this was not the issue. Additionally, both the left and right flaps were inspected, and it was found that they were both within the 30-degree range, showing that flap asymmetry was not a factor. Although if I was to keep my tinfoil hat on for a little while, I would argue that one side of the flaps could have initially been frozen, causing the flap to remain, and then broke free and extended during the incident. That's obviously a pure conspiracy and just a thought on my part, but just something to think about. The build-up of ice on the wings, with the aircraft changing the profile of the wings, extending the flaps to down, and turning onto base leg, does explain the loss of control and stall. Add to that a couple of seconds to try and solve the problem for the crew, and the airspeed is now low with them in a banked turn. The NTSB did conclude that the probable cause was a loss of control for undetermined reasons. Their investigation emphasised the importance of using anti-ice systems properly and continuously when in icing conditions. While the crew of Flight 988 activated the anti-ice systems early, they turned them off prematurely, likely underestimating the continued threat posed by rime ice as they descended below the cloud layer. Royal Air Freight Flight 988 serves as a tragic reminder of the unforgiving nature of flight in icing conditions. Even with modern technology and experienced crews, the risks associated with ice cannot be underestimated. This incident underscores the importance of constant vigilance and adherence to procedures when operating in cold weather environments. I hope you found this video informative. Please like, subscribe and share it with others who share a passion for aviation safety. Fly safe, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.